the second thing that I would like to talk about you is like, I mean, Mike Brown. I don't know if you were expecting such a career in the Sacramento Kings. So it looks like it's going to be the second NBA Coach of the Year for him. So what do you think about him? So what's the key of this head coach to make as far as he's doing?
Yeah, I mean, if I understood it right, I mean, the one thing is with Mike Brown is when he came into Sacramento, of the candidates they had interviewed, I felt he, and I said as much on the air at Fox 40 as well as our Kings Beat podcast that, that he was the right coach for the moment. And what I mean by that was he wasn't a first timer, but he wasn't necessarily. I mean, I think a lot of people would have considered him a retread. I didn't. I think he's a guy who hadn't done it in a long time, had some success under Steve Kerr with the Warriors and played a very crucial, important role for the Warriors. He first came in and really helped design an offense, one that most people wouldn't give him much credit for just because of the offensive talent that they have on that team. And then he had to segue over to being a defensive type of coordinator, which is more in line with what he is as a head coach. But the one thing I've known about Mike Brown is he's such an OCD, attention to detail type of coach. And really, a lot of really successful coaches are. But he comes from a Greg Popovich line of thinking, that kind of mentorship, if you will, and really has his own personality that he puts all over his team. And it hadn't, he won a championship in Cleveland. It's famously, we know what he did with LeBron James, but he also worked his way out of Cleveland when it didn't go so well. And then he had to go coach Kobe Bryant and the Lakers. And I always say coaching two generational talents, that's a really tough job for a lot of NBA coaches. Not everyone can take that type of setup. And it sounds weird because you've got a guy in Kobe Bryant and LeBron James, two generational talents, top 5, maybe top 10 all time in the NBA. But that can be difficult for some coaches, especially coaches that want a lot of control. Him coming to Sacramento, especially with what he learned, I think, at Golden State and each stop along the way, he has a lot of great players that want to share the ball. He doesn't have these egomaniacs or these guys who think that the ball, has to come to them so often. It's a very unselfish team. They play a certain style through Domantas Sabonis, who really touches everyone and makes everyone better on the offensive end. So with having Domas and having that Ferrari in De'Aaron Fox and trying to teach him to keep the foot on the pedal, he's had great success here, and they surrounded those guys with shooters. So it shouldn't really surprise anybody, but it did, just because we haven't seen it, like I said, for 16 straight seasons of playoff basketball.
Oh, definitely. So you mentioned at the beginning, so the Sacramento Kings, they are going to have most likely the best offensive rating of the NBA history. De'Aaron Fox, I believe, is Mr. Clutch. So they have also Mr. Triple Double, Domantas Sabonis, as you were saying. I had the opportunity to watch Sacramento at United Center a couple weeks ago, and what a game, and what a final 3-point from De'Aaron Fox. You also have an interesting couple that I would like to talk a little bit more, Keegan Murray and Kevin Huerter. So on top of mine, I can think about Klay Thompson and Stephen Curry, like more than 200 3-point within the same team. So that's definitely something special. So can you tell me like 2 or 3, the most important keys about this team, other than what I've been mentioning? I mean, you can also highlight more about what I discussed, but I want to understand your perspective, why this team is working so well.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned 2 guys right there, right off the bat, with Keegan Murray, who comes in as a little bit more of a seasoned rookie as opposed to like a Jaden Ivey or Paolo Banchero, who come in so young. Keegan Murray had the opportunity to grow a little bit and kind of become the player that he is in college. He had a couple years there, and he comes in a little bit older, a little bit wiser, and a little bit more mature. That being said, he's no different than any other rookie. He's going to hit some pitfalls along the way. So there's certainly plenty of things he can continue to grow in. But the one thing he knew he could do is score the basketball. And that corner 3, anything from the 3-point line, he's just really been impressive. Obviously, you mentioned the 200 threes that he's had. That sets a rookie record. And I think that record will be probably broken in a couple of years just because of the way the NBA is. And you see all these guys shooting the basketball. But nice for Keegan Murray to have that. It's a big stepping stone for him to have as he goes into a sophomore season. He plays such a different role on this Kings team than he would than what Paolo Banchero, someone like Jaden Ivey, who's going to a team that doesn't have playoff expectations. They just have a wide range for them to grow and get better and have the ball thrown to them and be a number one scoring option, if not at least a top 3 scoring option. That's not the case for Keegan Murray. He has to kind of earn it, and he has to go out there and be and not really make the mistakes a rookie is usually afforded in the NBA. So I'm glad you mentioned Keegan Murray. Kevin Huerter has been fantastic. He has playoff experience coming from Atlanta. They've made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. He played with a superstar in Trae Young.
Yeah.
He knows what it's like to play with a guy who's fast, who likes to share the ball. But having this type of offense where he's getting a lot more looks than what he got in Atlanta, especially as a starting 2 guard, has really flourished for him. And I think the guy, look, you mentioned Huerter and Keegan. I think the guy to me who's like the X factor, because if he doesn't have a good game, this team has a hard time winning. They've still won without him having good games, but it just looks a little different and a little bit wonkier. But when he's on, they look like world beaters. And I'm talking about Malik Monk, and it comes after a career year he had with the Lakers. He and Huerter have played really well alongside each other, and they provide a lot of spacing for people like Domas and Fox to work. So, yeah, I mean, to me, he could be in the running for 6th man of the year. I don't think he'll get it. I think he's had too inconsistent of a year, but that's been fine. He's been fantastic for what the Kings need him to be on both ends of the floor, especially as a playmaker, which this team can outside of Sabonis can sometimes hurt and really have a need for as the season goes on. So I think he's been that X factor. But you mentioned Malik Monk. I mean, you mentioned Kevin Huerter and Keegan Murray. Those 3 guys have certainly all played crucial roles with the Sacramento Kings team.
No, that definitely, I agree with you. So the rookie record at some point, I don't know, I imagine you are familiar with Juan Carlos Navarro. So he's one of the best talented Spanish player back at the time. So I believe he was very close to broke that record.